Good evening. I'd like to call this meeting of the Board of Ed to order. The emergency is to the rear, to the right, to the left. Ted, would you please call the roll?
Robert Tony.
Here.
James Marie.
Here.
William Ball.
Here.
Jeffrey Riassi.
Here.
Christine Bellarosa.
Here.
Carol Kelder. Here. Raymond McClary.
Here.
Scott Holston. Here. Timothy Wells.
Here. Please rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This meeting is called for the purpose of school budget information, personnel items, and board action items. Is there any member of the public wishing to address the board? Please approach the podium. Not all at once. None being heard. Ms. Mills, so you want to provide an update?
That's not the first slide. That's not the first slide.
You gotta back it up.
Your clicker.
Go back. You got that name over there. Went to my son held on spring break. Is it on? There you go. There you go.
We'll be looking at our revenue review, an expense update. We'll talk a little bit about what we've done with the COVID funding, potential reductions in our staffing, retirements, effect on the budget, additions to our staff, and a capital outlay project. Last presentation, I went through the calculations in a little more detail. Our tax levy remains the same, 45 million or 45.7 million.
Excuse me, Colin, can you put your mic on? Yeah.
I'll speak a little louder, maybe that works. So again, here's our impact on the taxpayers. It comes to about $20 per thousand. If you look at the bottom line there, that's the impact of the tax levy on your taxpayers. And last time we talked about foundation aid and the impact that that's having on our budget. So $16.9 million, but we lose the $441,000 because of Safe Harmless ending. There's a little change on this slide from last time. Transportation was updated on our projected expenditures as we continue in the next couple of weeks to look at costs. We'll adjust that if needed, but right now that looks like the amount of aid that we'll get back on expenditures and transportation. All the rest have remained the same since last time. Our other revenue from our BOCES refund, health and welfare services we provide, day school tuition, leases, Medicaid, pilots, interest and earnings, reimbursements, and E-rate all the same as they were last time, again, 1.7 million. So here's our revenue comparison the last 2 years, including this year and the year before. And if you look at the green, you'll see that though we have some greens coming along this year, all of them are lower than the year before. And if you look at the very bottom, you'll see that there's a 7.08% increase for this year's budget, but next year in comparison for the revenue budget, we'll only have a 2.88 increase. So here's our budget overview as it stands today. We'll continue to try to get updates on contracts, look at our supplies and materials, look anywhere that we can to do reductions that don't hurt our academic programs. The salaries and benefits, $55.6 million. Our BOCES services, 7.4, are up a little bit. Other contracts and services, $5.5 million. Transportation contracts, $5.2 million. Debt financing, nearly $3 million. Our annual capital outlay project is $100,000, as it is every year. Supplies and equipment, $1.7 million. And transfers to other funds, including extended school year and the school cafeteria, $325,000. The first number that appears in the total is with nearly $1 million, or a little bit more than $1 million, in reductions in staffing and level 1 staffings that Dr. Ursig will explain in a moment. And the number below it, the $79.8 million, is if we did not have those first round of reductions, in level 1 reductions.
So just, can I ask a question, just so I'm just following as we go? So that transportation contracts, that's $5.2 million.
Mm-hmm.
On your previous slide where it says expense-based aid, we'll get 2.8 of that back in aid.
Yeah, so we have about, I think it's a 0.57% return on transportation.
So that those are the two numbers that are
Yeah,
okay.
so as we add special ed students, or as they change their placements, that number can shift around.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Cost increase drivers. As we discussed last time, the consumer price index is above 2%. It's more than double that. So all over, the expenditures are rising. Special education tuition and those awaiting placement are about a 20% increase. We have to put the money in the budget for them until they get a placement. The capital debt and financing, we had an increase in that with 21%. COVID funding ends in September. Our general fund salaries, you have salaries coming off the grants, plus there are contractual increases, and that's about 15%. You have an increase in TRS, increase in ERS, health insurance increase of 13%, which is more than $1 million, it's $1.4 million, I believe. And our other insurance is 5% increase. We're finalizing our BOCES services, so that number could shift around a little bit still. Our reserves and fund balance. The first one is the ERS, employee the state retirement reserve. That's $3.6 million remains in there. Teacher retirement system is nearly $2 million. Our employee benefits and liabilities is $1 million. Our unassigned fund balance is $3.3 million, and capital reserve is $4.3 million. The reserves that we have the potential to use as funding are ERS, our TRS, and our employee benefits liability reserves. So those have specific uses, and we would have to consider which amounts would be prudent to use.
So now we're going to transition into just some highlights from where we have spent our federal COVID funds. So first you see elementary project coordinator, so performing data analysis for special projects, federally funded, working with our homeschooling population. This year we instituted an elementary assistant principal at Cahill. Obviously Cahill is our most diverse building in terms of needs as well as population. Providing extra layer of support, supervision, kind of overseeing the RCPC program that we have in that building as well. We also use our federal funds to provide for a social worker granting more school. This allows us to have a social worker at each of our buildings. Caseload, 22 students with IEPs, 6 students with 504s, 5 students with MTSS. But the day-to-day things that happen on, for the social worker are dealing with the crisis that happen, right? So it's threat assessments, it's suicide assessments, it's dealing with students who have, who experienced trauma at home the night before, right? So it's those types of things that they're also assisting with. We have 2 reading teachers now. One is federally funded, one is in the general fund. So prior to this, we did not have teachers who were dedicated to providing specialized reading instruction. So right now, we've got students who have got specialized reading instruction on their individual education plan, their IEPs. So these are services that we need to provide. Currently, we have a full-time staff member at Cahill, and then we have one that travels between Morris and Riccardi for that. We also have instructional coaches. So we've got 2 literacy instructional coaches and 2 math instructional coaches, which work through grades K-8. Right, education is our business, right? We need to constantly be up to date on what research says on our instructional practices. So our instructional coaches are embedded professional development, right? Any research that you read will say that embedded professional development on an ongoing, consistent basis is where you're going to get the biggest bang for your buck, right? It's not the one-day PD events where you go to a conference, talk about it the next day, and hope to implement something. It's the sustained PD, and that's what our instructional coaches have been able to provide for us so far. We also have our elementary summer academy. That's new. We will have that this year. We will exhaust our federal funds, but then we are not planning on rolling over in next year due to obviously the budget. Summer enrichment. Once again, we're going to exhaust our federal funds for this year, and then we'll have to have the conversation again at the end of next year about if we can maintain those things. But we will exhaust all of our federal funds possible this year for that. We're also using federal funds to support 2 elementary MTSS teachers, as well as 2 secondary MTSS teachers. These are at the junior high level. They're for math and literacy again. So these are students who are identified being behind grade level. They receive additional instruction for their needs. Credit recovery. Credit recovery is one that we brought in with our federal funds as well. So last year alone, we had 16 students receive diplomas who were not on track to receive diplomas because of credit recovery. Right? So 16 students may not have walked across the stage last year, but not for credit recovery. We also have 4 full-time TAs at the elementary level supporting small group instruction K-2. Now, with the budget, as you heard from Colleen, right, it's not where I want to be by any means, monetarily wise. We've had some very difficult conversations. Right, I'm a resident of the district. I've got 4 boys. Many of the things I'm going to be talking on the slides are things that I've either proposed or things I've advocated for or things that I support. So it's a very difficult, conversation for me to have at this stage in my career as well. So we started by looking at what's non-mandated. Right, so here's a brief overview of things that are not mandated. Pre-K, not mandated. Our UPK provider indicated that they need $80,000 next year to break even. So we, in our Collins budget, has the $80,000 in there at this moment of time. But that could be something that is not required. I have advocated for, increased funding with state representatives as well. Kindergarten, right? Having a registered nurse in every building. These are things that we have become accustomed to. Social worker in each building, psychologist in each building, elementary music, having chairpersons, lead teachers. So our lead teachers meet regularly, work on curriculum, common assessments, work on PD days. Enrichment, right? So the after-school enrichment, summer enrichment. Electives, we have added countless electives over the past couple of years to provide opportunities for our students. Summer academy, as we already said, that was new. Elementary art, elementary library, armed security, instructional coaching. Our advocacy specialist that we added to Cahill, who's bilingual, helping our families who speak Spanish. Athletics, right, not required. Club stipends, right? We don't need to have all these opportunities for kids after school, but I think it's something that Saugerties values. Dual credit courses, right? We have countless credit courses where a student can get high school credit as well as college credit. We're almost to the point where a student can leave with an associate's degree with credits. Assistant principals in general, credit recovery, and an athletic trainer. So these are kind of the things that we've been mulling over. Also into consideration are retirements, so I just want to kind of go overview those. So we've got a 5th grade teacher, Mr. Eric Riccardi, retiring. We're going to need to fill that section. Ms. Murphy at Riccardi, grade 2, is retiring. We'll need to fill that section. Ms. Grant at grade 4 at Riccardi, she's retiring this year. We'll actually shift that position to a need at Cahill Elementary School. So we'll be filling it, but shifting it over. Riccardi Library, Ms. Hofstetter is retiring this year. We would like to post for, we did post for a library media specialist. Secondary special education, Mr. Peterson. Secondary art, Ms. Tucci. Secondary guidance counselor, Mr. Schwartz. Secondary technology teacher, Mr. Kunin, is retiring. We're actually looking to, technology is very hard to fill. We've been trying to find a 4th technology teacher since I've been here, because I've been alive. But still, you know, so we're thinking of capitalizing on some of our internal staff that we have and kind of expanding computer science opportunities for that. And then Mike Laurette is retiring, so we're looking to replace that with the director of facilities or similar title. That was actually approved in last year's budget, but we've not kind of moved forward with that at this time. There are other retirements happening in the district, a couple in central office and so forth. But these are the ones that impact kind of instructional at 30. All right, so now we're going to get to level 1 reductions and kind of the impact that will have on education. All right. So everything I'm saying right now is not set in stone by any means. Right. This is part of the presentation to get feedback from the board, so that we can adjust things as necessary. So I want to stress that. This is not set in stone. These are ideas, and we try to prioritize as to kind of minimizing the impact to students. So currently, right now, we have MTSS teaching assistants that support our students, and they support our MTSS teachers. There are 6, so 2 in each of our elementary schools, 1 for math, 1 for literacy, in each. Looking at the numbers, we should be able to service all of our students with our certified teachers for that. That may come in with some also kind of rearranging of our special education teachers in the 5th and 6th grade, having them trying to provide some support for MTSS as well. Next, this is one that I advocated for a couple years ago, is ENL teaching assistants. Right, it's not required. We are currently going above and beyond what the federal requirements are. Is there a benefit to it? Absolutely. But this is a possible reduction for that, right? So right now we're meeting the required minutes, but we're also providing support where we can in other places, such as social studies, science, or math for that. Guidance secretary. So right now at the senior high level, there are 2 guidance secretaries. We would propose to have 1 secretary in that office, and then have another person or move staff to fill our currently vacant position of our attendance clerk, who is actually being covered by Michelle Polacco for the remainder of this year, to kind of shift the person that way. We also have a reduction in need for a part-time TA at the junior senior high school, and then we do have a part-time French teacher who teaches 2 classes right now. So, you know, do we eliminate possible opportunities for students? We can combine French 4 and French 5 to be more efficient with French. Other reductions are a nurse. So right now we still have a nurse at Mount Marion. We have reached out to BOCES to see if we can just contract with them to pick up any needs that should arise in that building. So that will come at an expense, but it should be a much smaller expense than salary and benefits. Library media specialist. So right now, actually when we consolidated Mount Marion, one of our ads was to have a librarian in each building. So this is actually taking a step backwards and having 2 librarians for our elementary schools. So there would be traveling between our 3 buildings for that. Secondary science teacher. This would be a possible reduction of elective offerings, as well as some of our section sizes may increase. We do have to stay within our contractual limits, so there will not be astronomical sizes, but class sizes may increase because of that. Currently, as I mentioned earlier, we have a federally funded MTSS and math and literacy at the junior senior high school. On here, it just has identified as mathematics and literacy teacher for that, because we do want to continue to support with MTSS, but it may look different. So it may be other teachers kind of picking up sections rather than having one dedicated person, or if we have one dedicated person and then other people are going to pick up sections that way for that. Part-time counselor, we have a part-time counselor and a part-time Spanish teacher, so we were looking to reduce that position. So that obviously section sizes would increase for Spanish, and then counselor loads would have to be adjusted. With this particular one, this counselor focused on E&L students. So it was kind of one central, kind of unifying factor for our E&L population for that. Just going back, I didn't say this, but if we adopt those level 1 reductions, that would be saving about $1 million for that. There are some alternates that we could go with for level 1. So historically, when we reduce teaching assistants, we've tried to reduce the part-time teaching assistants. If we were to reduce full-time teaching assistants, then that would be a larger savings because of benefits and so forth. So these ones do kind of focus on that. There is one there in the middle that says reduce full-time school counselor. So we could mathematically service all of our secondary students in grades 7 through 12 with 5 full-time counselors. We would reduce the part-time Spanish, but then I'm proposing to maintain a 0.4 guidance counselor to push down to the elementary levels, because we still need to provide access to counseling down there. So that would be a little bit more savings for us for that case. Level 2 reduction, so all the items on this list would add up to about $1 million again. This would be elimination of teaching assistants for small group instruction in K-2. Our elementary traveling MTSS teachers, those 2 that travel between Riccardi and Cahill, that would be a reduction of those. The elementary assistant principal. 1 teaching assistant at the secondary level, kind of looking at their utilization to be more efficient there. Securing each building, right? So at the beginning of this year, we have our security down in every one of our buildings. They have really, if you come and walk into one of our buildings, it's like they've been there forever. But that would save a significant amount of money, over $200,000, if we went back to our old way of with monitors. We do have the secure vestibules going into this summer as well. And then secretary for director of PBS. So we just transfer responsibilities to other staff members for that. All right. Level 3 reductions. This is approximately $1.3 million. So instructional staff, right? So we're at the point really at elementary level where we cannot really reduce anymore. We're as efficient as we can be in this model. So there will be a time in the future where we look to, do we bring 6th grade up to the junior, senior high to make it be a true middle school, where we can see some more efficiencies with that. I'm not saying that for next year. I'm just saying there will be a time where we have to maybe have those conversations. But in terms of reducing staff at the secondary level to be more efficient, the junior high school 7th grade next year is going to have 154 students and 176 8th grade students. Currently there's 4 teams. So, right, mathematically speaking, if there's 160 students in 7th grade, 80 kids per team, all right? By contract, teams can have up to 120 students. So what that means is that we can examine the junior high structure to see if we either reduce from 4 teams to 3 teams and have maybe 1 team that's split between 7th and 8th grade. Or we just we maintain the 4 teams, but then have our staff teach other courses to pick up other things. That would allow us to reduce a math teacher, English teacher, social studies, science teacher. Possibly special educator, but I did not incorporate that in that value. Also, at the secondary level, we have a retiring art teacher. We do have 2 art teachers at the elementary level who do travel. We could arrange for one of their schedules to come up to here to teach a couple courses for that. Are we going to have the same number of electives as we had in the past? No, we won't. But it's a way to be more efficient. Also, as part of this $1.3 million would be our 2 literacy instructional coaches. As I said before, with our instructional coaches, both literacy and mathematics coaches, right? Education is our business, right? Improving our craft should be our moral obligation. So taking these individuals away would be a big impact to the progress that we've made over the past couple of years. Not required though. Okay. Our mathematics teachers, just so you know, are SDM members, so they would go back into the classroom for that. Athletic trainer, Nate, he is amazing as well. It's great. He provides support for our students, both, in the moment triage, but also puts together planning, training plans and so forth for them. It's not required. And then we have stipends, so extracurricular clubs, right? So our extracurricular activities such as the 8th Street Alliance, such as our drama club, not required to be there. And then our lead teachers, I believe I mentioned earlier about lead teachers, if we reduce them, we get to that $1.3 million number. So with that, there are things that we will need to add, or maybe addition is not the right word, but maybe kind of amend or shift. The first one being is Cahill first grade, as currently has 2 sections. They're going to need to have 3 sections next year. So that's that position I spoke about earlier, shifting over to Cahill. That would maintain 54 general education sections. When we, prior to repurposing Mount Mary, we had 58, so it's been a decrease of 4 elementary sections for that. Just as, a piece of evidence, right? Enrollment is one of those things we can make a prediction, but then we see what happens. And what I mean by that is last year at Cahill, we had 22 students enroll from June 30th to September 15th. Right, that is one whole section of kindergarten kids. We had, so we plan, but then we have to adjust as necessary. E&L teacher, Culling's budget does have an additional E&L staff in there. I put 0.5. Our enrollment is increasing. We're at 62 to 68 to 83 students. That's the past 3 years. I will only foresee that number growing. We're, as I said before, we're able to maximize and meet everybody's required minutes based on their testing level. But this would provide a little bit more flexibility, obviously, and kind of anticipation for more students coming in. Expand computer science offerings. So we take that technology retirement and utilize our 2 amazing math teachers who are going for their computer science certificate. One has applied, one has already gotten it. And kind of, bolstering that, and then kind of we can backfill with a math teacher for that. So that technology retirement, in some sense, will become kind of a math position. Speech teacher. So we're also looking into our preschool special education services. So this current school year, we've got 46 students who are recommended for speech services alone at the preschool level. So this is ages 3, 4, and some 5, depending on if they're enrolling in kindergarten or not. Primarily 3rd or 4th grade. Ulster County has a severe lack of providers in the county. So we actually have some students who are not able to receive their recommended services. Right? So by them not getting it, then we're going to be recommending summer services for them. Then we're going to be recommending summer services when they get enrolled with us. So our thinking is if we can hire a speech teacher and we can apply to Ulster County to be a provider, then we can be reimbursed $80 per session for speech. So in some sense, the speech teacher would hopefully be offset by the number of students that they were servicing for that. So that could be kind of a net zero, especially with a high number of 46 students. Right? We're also looking at speech because speech is one of those things that if we, in general, right, early intervention, right, we get services earlier, we can see a lot of growth. Speech is one of my experience and a lot of experience, right? It's one of the things that we can really turn the tide on relatively quickly and then hopefully reduce the need as they get in school for that. We're also looking for physical therapy. So in general, our caseload for physical therapy has increased, the needs have increased in our district. But we also have 12 students who currently right now who should be provided physical therapy from the county. This will be another opportunity to get reimbursement from the county for providing services. This may be an area that we look in the future to kind of expand other requirements from the CPSE level for that. Okay. So with those kind of levels of reductions, we're also going to be recommending to use some amount of either fund balance and the reserves, as Colleen had mentioned before, to kind of make next year's budget work. We are going to be in the same conversation next year for this. So I would foresee a time where we as a district have to really sit down and put our priorities down on paper, which we've kind of done through our strategic planning process, which I'll be rolling out, and making a decision as a community. Are we going to support our students? Are we going to support our community? Or are we going to keep cutting? Potential capital outlay. So every year since I've been here, we've been having capital outlay. We've been doing Riccardi flooring. I'm going to propose that this year we would vote for next year for Riccardi to make Riccardi more ADA accessible. So right now we've got two entrances that are really ADA compliant. One in the front building of the school, and then one off to the side by the gymnasium. Right, we have a student there who is wheelchair bound, and it would be nice for her to leave the building through more than those two exits, to go out to recess and so forth. So with the capital outlay project though, some of the work does have to be inside, $10,000. So we'll be putting together a plan for a couple exterior ways, egress, as well as some internal things, and maybe door hardware, updating stuff like that to get to that $10,000 limit. But that would be my goal, to get approved this year so that we can plan next year and then have it be in place for, I guess, 2 years out. All right. So with that, last thing I want to mention before we take questions or recommendations or hear kind of concerns. The packets for board member petitions are available in the district office between 8 a.m. and 4 p.m. We have to complete the petitions due by 5 p.m. on Monday, April 22nd. And then at 11 a.m., the names are pulled out of the hat for order for the board agenda. So if you're interested in running for the board, please do stop by our office, pick up the packet, and get everything in by April 22nd for that. Okay. Questions, comments?
How much uncertainty is there since the governor's budget isn't complete yet?
Very good. So there is, I've expressed this before, everybody in the legislature that I've spoken to a couple are committed to getting the foundation aid back, and I'm hearing the 3%. I do still hear that the governor is kind of pushing back on those things. Fingers crossed that they would come to some kind of resolution this week so that we can plan effectively for that. For us, that's almost $1 million. It's just shy of $1 million if we were to get that. On another related note, Lieutenant Governor Antonio Delgado, I reached out to him in the fall. He's actually coming on our campus on Friday. So I'm meeting with him at 1 o'clock, and then we'll give him a kind of tour of the junior high school, and then he's going to be speaking with our AP government students. So hoping to kind of have a little leverage there as well.
Thank you for the presentation. None of these could have been easy recommendations. Do we have any flexibility with transportation? This is probably going to be a very unpopular suggestion, but when I was in California, the districts there had to cut all of their transportation, and the parents then had to take their kids to school. And I know that's not going to be reasonable for us, but would we have the ability for parents to permanently opt out of busing so that we could reroute and consolidate and maybe make some savings there?
Right now, we provide some transportation that is beyond the required mile limit, so we could look at that. But a parent can never give up their right entirely to transportation. They can't sign a contract and say, I will no longer use transportation, you can play on that, don't use the money. The state has written that very clearly, so we can't do that.
Thank you.
I mean, even like during COVID, when we got recommended, parents let us know if they were going to drive or so forth, we still kind of had a plan in case they needed to go back on that bus.
One question. So, the proposal to use fund balance, I don't know if this is our district's position, but I think many districts' position is you only are going to use fund balance for one-time expenditures because you don't want to use them for recurring expenditures because you're just going to end up in the same spot.
Correct.
We're in the same spot 3 years ago where we closed a district or closed a school in our district or repurposed our district because we were facing a $5 million budget gap in that one following year. And higher numbers of years out. So I think saying we're going to use fund balance really doesn't seem to be the right answer, unfortunately, unless, we can identify certain things that are going to be one-time expenditures.
Yeah, so this is not a long-term solution by any means. This will hopefully get us through when we have bigger conversations, and then for us as a community to decide, is there a point where we ask our community to go above the tax cap to support our students and to support our community, right? Because this is really an investment in our community, not just kind of bouncing the budget, which I understand is going to be difficult. I'm a taxpayer too. But the thing, historically about Saugerties, we have spent the least amount on kids in Ulster County, or towards the bottom, historically for per pupil expenses. And we have been able to do amazing things on that amount. But part of that is also because in years past, we didn't go all the way up to the tax cap, right? So, when the tax cap came out to now, we could have spent $16 million on our students. We could be up $2.5 million more now on our students for things that we have. But you see the work that our staff does, Mr. Wickham, Ms. Hayes, on what we've been dealing with, we've been doing amazing things. But if we want to keep this trajectory going, we're going to have to come to the table and see really what our values are going forward.
Have you considered raising the tax cap for this budget?
Well, this is where I kind of want feedback. On those proposed cuts, I guess maybe your gut reaction to those cuts, what things, so that we can, as a group, sit down and say, here's where the board's priorities are, here's where our priorities are, here's where we think the community's priorities are, and put together for the best plan forward. As you can see in Colleen's presentation, right, so the increase was 1.6 million, which was about 70 cents on $1,000, right? So if we were going up another 1.6, it'd be another 70 cents on $1,000 roughly, right, with my quick math. Don't hold me to it.
Just a concern with that I have is that every year our assessments go up. And, even the last year they said, the assessor said, well, your taxes really won't go up because your tax rate is going to go down. So although you have a rising assessment, your tax rate decreases. So ultimately there should be minimal impact on the household. But I think in the increase that we have now and then piercing the cap, I think, and if we get another increase in assessment this year, which is likely, I think it's going to be tough on taxpayers.
Yes, go ahead.
So, Dan, just so I have this right, so the level 1 reductions, so it's all 3 pages of the level 1 reductions are about $1.2 million, is that what it is? And then level 2 is like another option, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Well, right, so nothing is set in stone. We kind of group them in groups just to kind of, so it'd be easier to explain for that. So, if there are things in level 1 that, no, we can't do that, then it's going to be, we'll put it back in and kind of figure out where else can we kind of take from, unfortunately.
Okay. So I agree with you in that we have to really kind of write down what our priorities for. And I know one of our goals from a few years ago is to try to make sure that our students are reading at grade level by the time they're in 3rd grade, that they're on grade level. And I see in many of these where we're looking at MTSS, which is really where we can close the gaps for those kids. So I guess we would just kind of have to prioritize, like, what is it that we're really looking at? And also MTSS, in the big picture, it is a support service for our students to close those gaps. So later on, when they get to 4th or 5th grade, we're not looking to identify them for special ed, which in the long run will save us money there. So that's my concern with that area. In looking at all these, I don't want to see anything cut, I'm sure we all don't, but, I guess we have to, like you said, write down what our goals are, what our priorities are, and then go from there. It's, not going to be easy.
Once we have some final numbers from New York State, would you consider maybe having a workshop with the board where we, because we're getting hit with this right now and there's not a lot of time to deal with this, where we can sit down and maybe as a group prioritize that and come to a consensus as a board. So I don't know if the other board members would be open to it.
So let's say, another unpopular idea here. Let's say we talk about going past the cap. All right, so I just want to make sure I'm doing this right. So at 70 cents, if for the assessed value of the properties, let's say 300,000, it's a $210 increase is what that person would see. And if we went past that, like let's say we doubled it to something crazy, so that individual would have $420 increase for the year. And that would get us an extra 1.6 million.
If we doubled?
Yeah. And then that almost closes the entire gap.
Oh, it's not going to close the entire gap, right? Because
That were 2 million.
if we were to get the foundation reinstated with the 3%,
Yeah.
right, we'd be at $74 million. Right now, kind of rollover budget is at 79.
Okay.
So there's still going to be reductions. Just how deep do we want to go?
Okay.
So when we looked at the rollover budget, did we look at things that were one-time expenditures like, because I know last year's budget, we budgeted for a van or a new mail van for something like $100,000. Is that included in this rollover budget? You've excluded those types of things?
Correct.
If we go over the tax cap, what does that do for us for the following year? Do you start at ground zero again, or?
Well, we start at a higher base, so everything would be off that new tax levy limit. That's partly why, I mean, before when I said, right, we could have spent $16 million on our kids, is because we started at a lower level, right, so it's compounded.
How many years did we stay below the cap, do you know?
Off the top of my head, I do not.
I don't think there were any years above the cap that I recall.
No, yeah, we've never been above, but I don't know how many, off the top of my head, she has the
Right,
chart.
but I think we've gone to the cap at least most years. I think there may be
There was a
one
couple
or
of
two
years not.
years that we didn't go to the cap.
There were at least 3. I know there was a large amount left, like a $500,000 amount, and a $17,000 amount, if I'm remembering correctly from my spreadsheet, but I do have that. That will show you how high you could have gone, what the difference is, and how that compounds over time.
So if
I'm reading into this correctly, I mean, I think since I've been on the board, we've always advocated for the kids to kind of have continuity. And to have one full-timer go to 5 part-timers, that doesn't make sense to me. But if these cuts are made, isn't it just going to cost us more in the future to make up those gaps?
Well, I think yes and no, right? So there are, one of the things we always need to do as an organization, look for efficiency purposes, right? So for example, at the secondary level, right, if we were to maintain the four teams at the junior high school and have 80 kids on a team, right? If we increase that number, closer to the contractual limit of 120, we do have to consider the trade-off, right, in terms of that, right? The staff members have more students. Is that going to have an impact on the student instruction level?
all right,
So just to bring a little bit more clarification, if you have 1 full-time or 2 full-time TAs, and now we move to 4 part-times. So if 2 of them are out, that kid who is, thriving on continuity and needs structure is now dealing with an additional 4 people. And that's going to cause some kind of regression. So when I say it's just going to kind of aggregate and cost more in the future, I'm thinking the milestones that have been reached or achieved are now going to fall into regression.
Right, Paul, if I understand your question. So I agree with you on that, and that is why, I can speak since I've been here, but I know that years ago there was a shift to only hiring part-time TAs. We have maintained the level of full-time support staff in terms of TAs and aides and increased them in some cases. So, I mean, I would agree with you that having a full-time staff member with a student would be more beneficial. I don't disagree. You know, and over the last 3 or 4 years, we've had 14, I believe, if not more, full-time aides for students.
I appreciate your
Your dedication. It's obvious this is an uncomfortable conversation for you, and that's obviously because you care. So thank you for your time and your office's time and everything you guys have done to try and put this together.
Thank you for putting together this list. I think for the public, and as everybody else has said, that there is a level of priority that you have to look at. But I think a lot of people in the public, when they look at their tax dollars, would be very surprised at the things that we provide that are not mandated. When you look at elementary library and elementary art, and that we are not mandated to have a nurse in every building. I think people will be surprised at that. So I think it's a matter of not only priorities, but it's a matter of what level of education that you want to provide in our district. Do we want to be a stripped down district that marches kids through from kindergarten to graduation and tries to get them to graduation, we have to look at what we're graduating. And when I look at this list of things that are not mandated, if you took art, library, and music out of every elementary school, what exactly are we providing? And I understand, I fully understand the financial discussions that have to be made from a tax cap and things like that. But when I look at this list, I think people will be surprised that kindergarten is not mandated. That if people have been so used to it and just assume that it's part of our district and it's required.
Right, I mean, just to piggyback off that and reemphasize, right, the budget is ultimately a statement of our values, right, to the community. And, right, if you read literature and stuff, right, investing in our kids is investing in our community. And I think that's particularly important in places like Saugerties. I mean, I work in other places, I work in other states, or one other state. But we have a significant number of students who graduate and come back, right, and work for the district or work in the community, right? So when we're investing in our students, we are truly, truly, truly investing in our community. Where other communities that I've worked in, kids graduate, they go away, they don't come back. They just come back on holidays to visit parents, right? In my experience, Saugerties is unique in that a significant number of people come back here to live and raise their families.
Like you. One of the things that, and I agree with you, Jeff, that the community would be shocked at this stuff. Years ago, the last time the budget was defeated, the board spiked it and put it up for a second vote, and the community came forward, if you remember, and raised a tremendous amount of money. I think it was $150,000 so that it would be an athletic program. And we had an anonymous donation to put the other $150,000 in. And I think if we can meet and strategize and prioritize what's important for our students, we have the option of putting up 2 budgets. We can go for what we think we want to include, and then if the community says no, and I think we also need to do a lot of informational sessions with the community to show them like what's on the table. Then we can put the budget up again at a reduced rate if the community says that's not what they want. But I think we need to take advantage of all the options we have in this process.
I'm just going to, excuse me, there's really not much to chime in that hasn't, already been said. Obviously, the conditions that you're dealing with are not conditions that you created in the form of the fiscal picture, coming out of Albany and some of those changes. Looking at, all of these items here, I agree with Mr. Riazzi and Mr. Toman. There's a public education component that we're serving right now, and that really has to continue to be served while we're waiting to hear these final numbers. And this presentation really is the very best start to that. Because we do see, and I'm not by any means, a cynical person, but we do see that, we're putting information out there. We need feedback, right? You have taken great steps to incorporate and bring people together to identify priorities, identify, what do we want Saugerties to be, what is the vision, what is the mission, and all of these mechanisms that really help to inform what it is that we're supposed to be doing. But in the midst of all those conversations, again, people don't know what's at risk, right? They know that they want a school where, art and music contribute to the whole child, right? If you take art and music out of an elementary school, it's almost not an elementary school anymore, right? Where's the stuff on the walls? Where are the presentations? So this is a first step. This is upsetting to look at these things and, identifying redundancies, identifying things that, were wish list items and beginning to prioritize them. It is a first step, but, we need the public to be a little more engaged. And I think that this public education part of things in the form of here's a board presentation, here's what's at risk, really should produce some level of feedback. It doesn't produce the answers, but it should produce some level of feedback, and as you're saying, a statement of our values, what it is that we want our students to look like and our graduates. I'll go out right now and say I'm not against exceeding a cap. I'll say that right now before we even have final numbers. I'm not against exceeding a cap, but I'm an educator, right? My career leading up to the point of being on a board, this is not a new thing for me where I'm thinking about these topics, in just the recent few years. So I'm looking forward to the opportunity to hopefully hear from people. I'm looking forward to the opportunity that Bob's discussed, putting together a workshop, for us to revisit these types of things. And I know that where I'm able to share, feedback, it will absolutely be a statement of values.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll entertain a resolution for item A, personnel, instructional, non-instructional resignations. Moved by Ms. Kilder, is there a second? Second by Mr. Riazzi. Dan, you want to be part of the discussion?
No, after it's approved, I'll make an announcement.
Okay. Any discussion?
Can I just say, I just wanted to, there's only one person on here, and that's to Carol Petromal, who is retiring after 43 years. I just want to thank her. I know personally, I've worked with her personally, and she does a fantastic job, and the district is going to really, really miss her, for sure. So I just want to thank her for her years of dedication.
Yeah, she's going to be very difficult to replace. Any other comments, discussion? Mike?
No.
Oh. All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Just to piggyback off Carol, just to embarrass her further, I guess. So Carol started in the work-study program while she was a high school student in August of 1981. She was a clerical substitute in 1982 before being appointed as a full-time typist in January 1984. She was promoted to an administrative aide in building and grounds and transportation in November of 1987. She's worked for the district as a full-time employee for a total of 40 years as full-time. Obviously a well-deserved retirement, and I do not know how we will ever get the amount of knowledge out of her between now and retirement that we need to. Thank you.
Item E2, appointments. I'll entertain a resolution. Moved by Mr. Paulson, is there a second? Second by Ms. Kilder. Discussion. None being heard, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Item F, board action discussion items. I'll entertain a motion for item 1, ProCare therapy. Moved by Ms. Bellerosa, is there a second? Second by Mr. Ball. Discussion. None being heard, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Item F2, Bernie Donegan, agreement amendment resolution. Is there a, moved by Mr. Mooney. Is there a second? Second by Mr. McClary. Discussion? None being heard, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Item 3, board member virtual workshop attendance. I'll call for a resolution on that. Ms. Bellerosa, is there a second? Ms. Kilder? Discussion? None being heard, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Item G, proposed executive session. I'll call for a motion to adjourn to executive session. Moved by Mr. Paulson, is there a second? Second by Mr. Yatsi. Discussion? None being heard, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Yeah. He's got to make a motion to the meeting.